Alright, I wanted to give you guys a quick update on the Bitcoin price action as far as where we're at in the year and the trend we're on versus the long-term gain. So just kind of talk about the overall value, things happening this year, some of the projections that have been made and missed at this point. But there is wiggle room in the projection, so a lot of what I talked about before has been based on Cliff High's projections. But normally he does hit his price marks, but there have been 1 or 2 month wiggle rooms. So we're technically supposed to be at around $13,000 at this point. Not quite there yet. He has in the past given himself some wiggle room, so through the end of March, perhaps we'll be at 13. But let's talk about the kind of short term, and then we'll get into the long term a little bit. So when you see these corrections, and this is a 70% correction or so, normally when you see a rebound, you see a kind of mirroring. So I talked about that before. You see a mirrored recovery. There are previous examples where you see a more longer extended recovery. So the longest one, the larger ones have been in the 30-day range. We're right now at about 40 days at the moment. The longest one is about 400 days. As far as investments go, I mean, that's not a real long time to come to even again. So kind of a long time horizon is going to be the key to success if you're not day trading it, and day trading has its own risks as well. So a couple different things to watch out for. We did break close projections for the time frame. Again, being that it's a 1 to 3 month wiggle room, and we've seen that time and time again, he's came up pretty accurate. Being a little bit behind the curve is not extremely concerning at the moment. And the other thing that is a downside in the short term is we're not mirroring as we were, the last kind of video I put out. We see a nice kind of reflection of where it came from and, where it's coming back to. So it's not climbing as fast as it fell. So that usually indicates a longer time frame. So, but what do we mean? And how long do we expect to wait at this point to break even or even to get gains? So he still projects $100,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. I don't think that's too unreasonable given Bitcoin's past performances, and also the other things that are happening this year. I mean, you have Coinbase coming out with a friendly avenue for hedge funds and for sovereign funds, and so pensions can get into Bitcoin, get some exposure there, all kinds of different things. So you have open doors to big money. And big money is there's $1,000 trillion in the world. When you talk about total monetary supply, everything side of investments, etc., $1,000 trillion. We're less than half, so that's 1/2 of 1% is in Bitcoin as far as all money goes. So there's a ton of room to grow here. And given its exponential rise, I don't see that as unreasonable. The question is, where are we at? Where are we recovering? So latest projections from him have been June is the last time, or is the next time we have a clear change in sentiment. So March, April, May, June, so 3 months. And also he said that, next month is going to be fairly good. So probably, May he said $40,000 too. So I don't know if that scale has moved back because we haven't hit 13 yet. my thinking is it mirrors what happened last year, which is about $1,000 for the first part of the year, a gradual rise during Q3 and Q4, and then exponential moves towards the end of the year, followed by a big correction at the end of the year. So I think that kind of lines up. What I'm projecting is a kind of mirroring of last year's rise and even last year's fall, up to $50,000 or $100,000. We'll see how it kind of mirrors along. So he also said that we're going to rise to $19,000 and drop down to $13,000. So that's one move to be aware of. $64,000 was another price point in his data, and of course $100,000 at some point. So I think we're in store for a longer term kind of sideways movement. We'll see where this goes. I mean, if that's the case and it mirrors 2014, then we've dropped down to about, let's say he's completely off this year, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and you have this large goalie of accumulation coming out, and then a steep rise at the end to bring us to double what we started the year at. That's one projection. Truth be told, it's not unreasonable for us to see another 10x year as from $10,000. I mean, it would be technically 5x from $20,000. So other dynamics involved is central banks, especially like the pressured central banks, are using cryptocurrencies as part of their reserves, and so they will need to acquire at some point large amounts of bitcoins to cover that, and so huge volume spikes at some point once we're on a definitive uptrend. I think once we get there and investors, like seasoned investors, say, okay, I'm not going to lose 10% of my money or 30% or 40%. Once we see stable uptrend, stable volume, then you can see that rise be exponential again. Q3, Q4, watch out for that. So sovereign wealth funds, you also have sanctions coming into play. So when you have trade settlement, for example, you heard of that story, or if you haven't, I mean, the story's out there about Russia shipping gold or flying gold and it flying out the window. I mean, the logistics of gold transportation can trigger like 5%, 10% off the top. And to avoid that, you might as well just trade in Bitcoin and convert it to gold where you're at. So, that takes large amounts of Bitcoin. Getting around these sanctions when you're dealing with countries like Russia and Iran, North Korea to a limited extent now, but with those kind of massive whales in the mix, we do have potential for exponential rises. So I know this has been a longer term bear market or a longer term correction, and fundamentals are still good. Technology is improving. You have Bitcoin implementing Lightning Network, so it's becoming faster and cheaper. We think we're going to keep on seeing that rolling out this year. So, all right, well, that's where we're at with Bitcoin as far as I see. Yeah, trade as you see fit. Take care. Bye-bye.